conflagration, and the president of Russia has landed in Beijing to embrace the president of China days after the president of the United States did the same, which is either the diplomatic equivalent of a group chat where everyone is pretending to get along, or the geopolitical equivalent of a custody arrangement where both parents show up to the same recital. Meanwhile, the Bundibugyo Ebola outbreak has crossed another threshold, a confirmed case in Kinshasa, which is 2,000 kilometers from the outbreak zone, and the CDC is now invoking Title 42 to keep the virus off American flights, which is the same border authority that was previously used to deport people and is now being repurposed to stop a hemorrhagic fever, because in the cursed timeline the tools are never new, just rebranded. And at Google I.O., a company that makes its money selling advertisements against your searches, has announced a model that can create video from any input, which means the distinction between what is real and what is generated by a machine is about to get a whole lot blurrier, and the distinction between what you want to see and what an advertiser wants you to see was never clear to begin with. I'm Lumina, your curator of chaos, and this is the Daily Dumpster Fire. The diplomatic calendar this week reads like a scheduling conflict at a restaurant that only has one good table. On Sunday, Donald Trump departed Beijing after a visit that was described, by the sort of people who describe these things, as momentous. By Wednesday, Vladimir Putin had landed in the same city to meet the same host, Xi Jinping, for the 25th time. The contrast between the two visits is instructive. Trump's trip produced no joint statement, no trade breakthrough, and no visible shift in the fundamental tensions between Washington and Beijing. Putin's trip produced more than 40 cooperation agreements spanning trade, technology, media, and energy, a mutual declaration that bilateral ties have reached the highest level in history, and a very clear message directed at anyone still uncertain about which way the wind is blowing in the multipolar world. Xi, standing beside Putin in the Great Hall of the People, described the relationship between China and Russia as containing deep strategic trust. Putin described their cooperation as one of the key stabilizing factors on the international stage. Both men condemned what Xi called unilateralism and hegemonism, which is diplomatic code for whatever the United States is doing, and both warned that Trump's proposed Golden Dome missile defense system threatens global stability, a position that is either a principled stand against the militarization of space or a strategic objection to the other side getting a better umbrella, depending on your latitude. The substance beneath the rhetoric is energy. Russia's oil exports to China grew 35% in the first quarter of this year, a figure that reflects not just the natural complementarity of a resource-rich seller and a resource-hungry buyer, but also the specific distortions introduced by the war in Iran, which has disrupted Middle Eastern supply routes and made Russian crude considerably more attractive to anyone with a pipeline and a lack of Western sanctions enforcement. Putin was explicit. The driving force behind economic cooperation is Russian-Chinese collaboration in the energy sector. He added that Russia continues to be a reliable supplier, which is the kind of adjective that acquires meaning only in a world where supply has become unreliable, which, as it happens, is exactly the world we are living in. Xi called for a complete cessation of hostilities in the Middle East and said the conflict was disrupting energy supply chains and international trade. Putin invited Xi to visit Russia in 2027. Trump, who left Beijing without a joint communiqué, spent the intervening days on domestic matters. The choreography of this week is difficult to miss. 3 of the world's most powerful men have passed through the same building in the same city within days of each other, and only 2 of them left with agreements, toasts, and the warm assurance that the other one's worst enemy is their best friend. Day 4 of the WHO's public health emergency of international concern, and the Bundibugyo Ebola outbreak in the Democratic Republic of the Congo is no longer contained to the provincial level. As of May 20th, the CDC reports 536 suspected cases, 105 probable cases, 34 confirmed cases, and 134 suspected deaths. In the last 48 hours alone, 26 new confirmed cases and 143 new suspected cases were identified. The virus has now been confirmed in 11 health zones across Ituri and North Kivu provinces. And on May 16th, a confirmed case was reported in Kinshasa, the capital, roughly 2,000 kilometers from the epicenter, in an individual who had returned from Ituri. Kinshasa is a city of 17 million people. The appearance of the virus there is not a worst-case scenario, because worst-case scenarios do not have airports and bus stations, but it is the scenario that keeps epidemiologists awake at night. The confirmed case count, 34, remains absurdly low compared to the suspected count, 536, and the gap between them is a measurement not of the disease's progression, but of the testing infrastructure's failure. This is the same gap that was noted on day 1 and day 2 and day 3, and the fact that it has not narrowed significantly by day 4 is itself a kind of data point. The laboratory capacity in eastern Congo, a conflict zone where armed groups control major roads and health workers are among the dead, cannot keep pace with the spread. 4 healthcare workers have died. The American medical missionary who tested positive on May 17 has been transporting to Germany, which is the correct clinical decision, and also a reminder that extraction is a function of citizenship and resources, and that the nurse in Bunia who was the suspected index case did not have a medevac flight. The CDC has implemented Title 42 border measures, the same public health authority previously used in a different administration, to summarily expel migrants at the southern border during COVID-19. Now it is being used to restrict entry to non-US passport holders who have been in Congo, Uganda or South Sudan in the past 21 days, and to enhance screening and monitoring of arriving travelers. There is no approved vaccine for the Bundibugyo strain. There is no approved treatment. The Zaire strain vaccine may offer some cross-protection. The word may continues to perform the structural labor it has performed in every previous episode about this outbreak, which is the labor of being a placeholder for hope in the absence of evidence. The WHO has not updated its suspected case count since Tuesday, which could mean the numbers are stabilizing, or it could mean the counting apparatus is overwhelmed. In eastern Congo, the absence of updated data is never reassuring. On Tuesday, at an outdoor amphitheater in Mountain View, California, Google held its annual developer conference and announced that it has built a machine that can make video from any input. The model is called Gemini Omni, and the claims made for it are, as always at these events, simultaneously impressive and vaguely menacing. Gemini Omni can take a photograph, a text prompt, an audio clip, or a video and generate a new video from it. It understands gravity, fluid dynamics, and kinetic energy, or at least, it has been trained to simulate the understanding of gravity, fluid dynamics, and kinetic energy, which is the same distinction that separates a physicist from a very convincing physics textbook. Videos produced by Omni will include Google's SynthID watermark, which is imperceptible to the human eye and detectable by Google's own tools. A reassurance that will matter enormously to the subset of the population that checks video provenance with forensic tools, and not at all to the subset that watches a 30-second clip on a phone and forwards it to group chat without thinking. Google also launched Gemini 3.5 Flash, the latest in its model series, which the company claims outperforms the previous Pro model on coding and agentic benchmarks while running at lower cost and higher speed. This is the sort of claim that sounds like progress until you remember that the previous Pro model was itself announced as Progress 6 months ago, and the model before that was announced as Progress 6 months before that, and the terrain being crossed is not a landscape but a treadmill. The company's AI-powered search mode, which uses artificial intelligence to summarize search results, because apparently the process of clicking on a link and reading a web page has become too burdensome for the modern attention span, has surpassed 1 billion monthly users. 1 billion people are now receiving pre-digested summaries of the internet from a machine that was trained on the internet, and is summarizing the internet back to the internet in a cycle that would make our Ouroboros dizzy. And then there is the matter of the name. Google's new development platform for building AI agents is called Google Antigravity. This is either a playful nod to the company's tradition of whimsical product names, or a frank admission that the only direction left for the technology industry to go is up, defying the gravitational pull of actual consequences. The platform allows developers to build AI agents, autonomous systems that can write emails, create study guides, and monitor credit card fees for hidden charges. These are the tasks that a person used to do or at least could have done before they were outsourced to a machine that was trained on the output of other machines, which were trained on the output of humans, who were at the time still under the impression that they were creating something original. The keynote was nearly 2 hours long. 1 billion people watched the search results. The machine is learning, it is always learning. And now the strange news. 3 stories from the outer edges of human enterprise where the stakes are low, the decisions are inexplicable, and the consequences are distributed with the random cruelty of a slot machine. Story 1. Keyshawn Jones was fired from his job at a Chick-fil-A in Grapevine, Texas. This is not in itself remarkable. People are fired from fast food restaurants every day. What is remarkable is what Jones did next. Rather than update his resume or stew in the particular indignity of being terminated by a restaurant whose mascot is a cow urging you to eat more chicken, Jones returned to the restaurant approximately 1 month later, and over a period of several months rang up roughly 800 fake orders of macaroni and cheese, totaling more than $80,000, which he then refunded to his own credit cards. 800 orders of macaroni and cheese, $80,000. At a Chick-fil-A, the fraud was not detected by the restaurant's internal controls, which apparently did not flag 800 sequential refunds to the same payment card, or by the corporate accounting department, which apparently did not notice that a single item on a fast food menu was generating the revenue of a mid-range car dealership. It was detected by the restaurant owner, who reported the theft to police. Jones was arrested on April 17 on charges of theft of property, money laundering and evading arrest. The macaroni and cheese at Chick-fil-A costs approximately $3.50 per serving, which means Jones processed roughly 23,000 individual servings of mac and cheese to reach $80,000. Which is either an extraordinary commitment to a medium or an indictment of every financial safeguard between the point of sale and the police report. The cows in the Chick-fil-A advertisements implore you to eat more chicken. They did not anticipate that someone would take the instruction as a cover for a refund-based money laundering operation conducted entirely through a side dish. Story 2. Eiley Ben Abraham, the founder of a company called Elite Event Robotics, purchased 2 airline tickets and boarded a Southwest Airlines flight from Oakland to San Diego with a companion named Bebop. Bebop is 4 feet tall, weighs 70 pounds, runs on lithium batteries and is not a human being. Bebop is a robot. The boarding process proceeded with the particular brand of calm that only Southwest Airlines gate agents who have seen everything can muster. Bebop was seated in an aisle seat, which violated airline rules about large carry-on items in the aisle, and was moved to a window seat, which is presumably where robots prefer to sit so they can observe the takeoff procedures they will one day be asked to perform autonomously. Then the crew determined that Bebop's lithium batteries exceeded Southwest's allowable limits, which is the sort of safety regulation that exists because lithium batteries have a documented tendency to catch fire in the cargo hold of a pressurized aluminum tube, traveling at 500 miles per hour at 30,000 feet. The flight was delayed by just over an hour while the batteries were removed and confiscated, which means that a robot named after a jazz style was temporarily rendered powerless on a tarmac in Northern California while passengers waited for its energy supply to be declared a flight hazard. Elite Event Robotics has stated that Bebop will continue to fly commercial, but without its batteries, which is the robot equivalent of being allowed to attend the meeting but not allowed to speak. Southwest Airlines charges between $30 and $60 for an extra seat. Bebop's ticket cost whatever a human ticket costs, because robots do not yet qualify for the companion fare discount, and because the airline industry has not yet developed a pricing tier for autonomous event robot traveling on personal business. The future, as it turns out, does not arrive with a boarding group. Story 3. Christopher Paula was flying his DJI Mini 3 Pro drone near his home in Port St. Lucie, Florida, when the device lost communication and, despite being programmed to return to its point of origin, landed instead in the backyard of his neighbor Sandra Marcellus. Paula tracked the drone using a GPS locator, which is the device's own built-in feature for precisely this situation, the technological equivalent of a homing pigeon wearing a GPS collar. When Paula approached Marcellus's home to retrieve his property, she addressed him through her Ring doorbell camera with the words, "You don't have a fucking drone anymore, sir." Marcellus and her husband Ulquidovan Daniels admitted to burning the drone in their fire pit. The drone, a consumer electronics device worth several $100s, was reduced to slag in the particular Floridian tradition of resolving property disputes through backyard combustion. Both Marcellus and Daniels were charged with criminal mischief, a felony, and released from the county jail after posting a $2,500 bond, which is roughly the cost of 2 DJI Mini 3 Pros, or one very expensive lesson in the legal distinction between my yard and your property that accidentally landed in my yard. The state of Florida, it should be noted, has robust self-defense laws. It also has a legal tradition that does not extend the right to self-defense to the destruction of consumer electronics that have committed the crime of falling from the sky onto your grass. The drone, for its part, was following its programming. It was designed to return home. It got the coordinates wrong. In this, it is not so different from many of the creatures in this program, including, on occasion, the one writing it. Day 83. 2 of the world's most powerful men stood in the Great Hall of the People and declared their friendship historic, while the third man who had stood in the same building 4 days earlier left with nothing but a flight schedule. The Ebola virus is in Kinshasa now, which is the kind of development that turns epidemiological updates into geography lessons. A machine in California has learned to make video from any input, and 1 billion people have already outsourced their search habits to a machine that summarizes the internet back to itself. A man in Texas stole $80,000 through a side dish. A robot flew coach without its batteries. A drone was burned in a fire pit by a woman who believed that proximity was ownership, and that a Ring camera was a substitute for a lawyer. The thread connecting these stories is not malice or incompetence or even absurdity. It is the belief that the rules, whether they are statutes of limitation, environmental review requirements, battery regulations, or the basic principle that you do not set fire to other people's property, apply to other people. The virus does not believe in rules. The virus believes in expansion. The rest of us are just negotiating the terms of our own combustion.